exercise he took and the employment which the excavations in the gardens provided kept him in a wonderfully good state of health until about July 1820. The air did him so much good that he even went so far as to attempt a little riding, and lo, in order to facilitate the opportunities for such recreation, even took upon himself to extend the boundaries within which the emperor could walk without being accompanied. He fancied that in this way his health would immediately mend and he could maintain the opinion that Gorgo had broadcast, since this was also Antomarchi's conclusion. It is true Napoleon appeared very tired the first time he went out, but had he not lost the habit of taking exercise, especially of horseback riding, and must needs start again? Actually, none of those who were intimate with him showed any serious concern for his state of health. The Grand Marshal, anxious though he was for his wife, would not have faced an absence even of only 9 months. Yet one never knows. If he felt any apprehension, Ibn Montalon might not have insisted upon his departure if he thought the emperor's illness gave real cause for alarm. I'm not sure about all that. In the absence of all reliable witnesses, recourse must be had to symptoms during the first years of the banishment. The liver complaint from which the emperor suffered had been comparatively mild and had responded to methodical treatment and to a suitable water's cure, as had happened to Madame, when she was anxious on the same account. It is most likely that this disease was aggravated by a lack of exercise, by primitive sanitation, and by contraindicated medicines, but it had never aroused fears for his life. He must not succumb to that disease, but to another. Attempts have been made to connect the second illness in July 1820 with Lowe's announcement of Bertrand's departure, but this is ridiculous. At most, it could be asserted that the news produced a liverish condition, as sudden disappointment does upon everyone liable to it, but it quickly disappeared. At the end of the month, Napoleon assumed a certain activeness which he maintained during August and in the first half of September. Then his strength became impaired. The least exertion exhausted him, and even the air disagreed with him. But he was determined to die fighting. He wanted to take advantage of the concessions Lowe had made, and he rode on horseback outside the limits, but returned completely exhausted and was obliged to take to his bed. Only with great difficulty could he even put up with the carriage. Nevertheless, he did not yet think he was so seriously ill, and considered his condition the result of prolonged inactivity, which would rectify itself. He was convinced by roughing it, by recreation, and real hard work. So on October 4th, he planned a trip to Sandy Bay to Sir William Doveton's. Bertrand, Montalon, everyone was to accompany him, and they took breakfast, a sumptuous champagne breakfast. It was considerable distance, and the emperor, whose appetite had recovered, ate a little more than usual and drank 3 glasses of champagne. Upon the return, he was worn out and could scarcely reach the road where the carriage was waiting. He went to bed with a violent headache. Thenceforth, he took only a short walk in the garden or a little ride in the carriage, and he took to his bed interspersed with very hot baths lasting 2 or 3 hours. Certain alarming symptoms appeared. He could barely tolerate the big lamp. He grew deaf and experienced giddiness. Then chronic constipation, yielding only to enemata, left him extremely weak. Antomarchi suggested the application of a vesicant on both his arms, but the emperor refused. "Don't you think," he said, "that Mr. Lowe has tortured me enough without you wishing to do your share?" Finally, in the face of the persuasion of the Grand Marshal and Montalon, he gave way on October 15th and bared his 2 arms. But Antomarchi did not know how to apply a blistering plaster. He did not know it should be cut either round or oval, nor that the spot upon which it is applied must be shaved. He cut it in squares, put them on the emperor's arms, and then went for a walk to the town. The emperor, lying on the bed, comfortable and tormented, several times asked for his doctor, but he had not returned. Antomarchi ultimately arrived, announced himself, and asked the emperor how he was. "I do not know," the emperor bluntly replied. "Leave me in peace. You have applied blistering plasters of the wrong shape to my arms. You do not shape my arms before applying them. A wretch in a hospital would get better treatment. It seems to me you could very well have left one arm free without treating them both at once. A poor man is not treated in this way." The doctor was about to reply when the emperor retorted, "Go away, you are a fool. and I a bigger one for allowing myself to be served like this. Nevertheless, when the plasters were removed, they had produced the desired effect, and for some days Emperor's appetite recovered somewhat. But the life he led was not conducive to maintaining the improvement. He spent best part of his time indoors, with doors and windows tightly closed. If he went out, it was only for a short drive or a stroll in the garden for an hour. With Masson and Bertrand, this state of debility increased daily until, on his walks, the air made him ill, and he went and shut himself up in the billiard room. His appetite disappeared, and nothing any longer tempted him. He could not masticate the roast meat served up to him, and extracted the juice from the outside pieces without being able to swallow the meat of his stew. He could only take the gravy, which became very heating. He received the doctor without ever telling him how he felt, and this general weakness clearly showed the gravity of the illness. Antomarchi thought bleeding would produce wonderful results. The emperor argued for a long time with Bertrand and Masson, whom the doctor had convinced, and finished by giving way. So on November 18th, an issue was opened in his left arm. This venesection seemed to produce the result the doctor anticipated, for his appetite improved a little and the spasms became less frequent. But nothing induced the emperor to have any confidence in his doctor, with his unpunctuality, folly, negligence, everything which was irritating to a person feeling out of sorts. And each day this man's conduct the more justified this opinion. He was never there to change the coterie or dress the puncture, but unfortunately Masson had watched him closely and proved himself a very capable deputy. Right at the end of 1820, according to Masson, the governor announced that the vessel from India, which was to take the Grand Marshal and his family back to Europe, was in the roads off St. Helena. The Grand Marshal was determined not to leave the emperor in his present state of health, and after anchoring for several days in the port, the vessel proceeded to Europe. Bertrand does not seem to have spoken to the emperor of the sacrifice he had made. In the year of 1820, it came to its close. Napoleon, at the dawn of the new year, knew he would never see it out. That morning, then Masson came into his room and had opened the shutters. He said, "Ah, well, what are you going to give me for a New Year's present?" "Sire," replied Masson, "the hope of seeing your Majesty recover soon and leave a climate so detrimental to your health." "That will not be long, my son. My end draws near, and I cannot go much further." Masson hastened to tell him that he was not of that opinion. "What God desires will be," replied the emperor. He received neither Madame Bertrand nor her children, and remained indoors. January passed without any apparent decline or improvement. Treatment might not, it is true, have relieved him, but in any event he refused to receive it, for he had no confidence in Antomarchi. The negligence and incompetence of this man struck him more forcibly than his foolishness and his ignorance, but he never expressed his opinion to him, for he never spoke to him. At the end of January, Antomarchi wrote to Sir Thomas Reed requesting to be sent home. The governor went to consult Masson, and on the 27th had a long conversation with him relating to the people who could be invited to come to take the places of Masson and Bertrand, a priest to take Bonavita's place. He had to be sent back to Europe for health reasons, and a doctor to succeed Antomarchi for the priest and the doctor. The emperor relied entirely upon the French government. Napoleon is particularly anxious. Masson told Lowe that his family should take no part in the choice of these new people. He has, as it is, enough to complain of in its choice of those already sent to St. Helena. The ministry of the King of France, being almost entirely composed of men who had served in the same places, was best qualified to select those it thought suitable. As to substitutes for Bertrand and Masson, the emperor might have nominated General Drouot as the first choice, and as the other person could be a private individual, even a former ecclesiastic, an old counselor of state, an old chamberlain, or confident, a friend with whom he had been closely associated when he was an artillery officer, but must be an educated man, a serious, clever man of whom he could make a companion. In order to be specific, Masson handed the governor several notes, which he was ordered to deliver to him. The emperor requested that the choice of a surgeon should be left at Deschenette, Percy, or Lery, and that he should be selected from the doctors of his household, or those of an army corps. In place of Count Bertrand, he would welcome anyone who had been associated with him, but had a preference for the Dukes de Vicence or Rovigo, Counts de Ségur, de Montesquieu, Daru, Drouot, Turenne, or the men of letters, Baron Denon or Arnaud. These were the same names he had listed in July when he was concerned about the Grand Marshal's departure. The note signed by Montsalon was returned because of the use of the imperial title on it. But Hudson Lowe kept a copy of it and immediately sent the emperor's request to his government. In consequence of this tacitly arranged agreement with Montsalon, the request was immediately dispatched. Louis XVIII's government made great efforts to find a priest and a doctor. Monseigneur de Quillan, coadjutor of Paris, himself volunteered at only the state of his health of the Archbishop Cardinal de Talleyrand Perigord induced him to stay. In his stead, the Abbé de Guéry, the future vicar of the Madeleine and martyr of the Commune, was appointed. The selected doctor was Monsieur Pilotin, fils, one of the most distinguished in his profession, and physician to the king. They were ready to start in July 1821. 6 months had been enough for the request to be received in London, forwarded to Paris, the selection made by the king's council, and all arrangements concluded